hello, everybody. It's already 8 o'clock again. Switch on over. I think we're gonna see how long my camera lasts, because we're getting a flickering sign of empty battery, even though it's plugged into the PC. We're gonna see how far into the stream we get before it gives out. Wish me luck. Yeah, we'll see about that. It wouldn't be like a stream without any technical difficulties, right? So, wouldn't be the first, definitely not gonna be the last. Hello, Slate. Hello, David. Hello, Designer. Hello, Evelyn. Hello, CSDevX and Connor B. Hope you're all doing well. Hello, Dylan. Please, no more technical difficulties. Evelyn, you're just getting started. Welcome to the fun now. You get to deal with technical difficulties live. Trying to open a little drink here. There we go. Yeah, thank you so much for running the last workshop that we had this weekend, Evelyn. The fear. Yeah, I know. First couple of times I was dying. Yeah, when I talk about like fear in that sense, I don't think a lot of people know about this. I think I mentioned it on stream like once or twice, but we do these team challenges, right? Like twice or like 3 times a year we do team challenges where we basically put people together in a team. They make a project for 5 weeks, and then it usually starts out with like a kickoff presentation, right? So there was a time when someone was building the presentation in the background as I was doing the presentation live. Because from all the things that we could have forgotten, it was the presentation itself. That was fun. That was definitely not stressful at all. Yeah, I have my fair share of like these stupid oversights, you know? But I think that's how you'd learn to avoid them next time. I feel like the fear is a part and parcel of it. But yeah, Dylan, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, what's been happening? So we went to my sister's wedding, which was awesome. Even though I was like almost fully knocked out the entire time by just freaking hay fever. And of course, this beautiful weather is not helping because I think it's like, I don't know, close to 30 degrees here. But yeah, the wedding was fun, even though we had a delay. It was a really expensive trip back because it's the UK and all that kind of stuff. But the wedding itself was really fun. It was in a really nice location. So yeah, to say it live on stream, even though like it was just a party, so it's not like the official thing. Congratulations to my little sister. Yeah, the party was really fun. Had a couple of my friends there as well. It was cool. Had a good time with my parents. Yeah, so we did that on, well, we flew there on Friday, then came back Monday evening in the middle of the night, and then straight back into things. So yeah, it was yeah, it was fun. It was fun. I'm not gonna lie, there was a part of me that was like, oh, I just want to stay home and do more Unreal. Oh, makes me sound so sad, but hey, that's just the reality of things. I'm just so addicted to certain things at certain points, you know, and Unreal was just my stick for that week, and I was like, oh, I just want to do more of it, please. Yeah. And now I need to focus more on the course. So that's what I've been doing. So gotten back, I'm currently writing a bunch of stuff for the course, because that is the way that it's going to get the quickest, and yeah, can't get distracted with anything else. So yeah, I'm currently writing about visual storytelling for our course, and we'll be talking about location logic afterwards. So that is what I am doing. Anyways, quick introduction over. There's nothing more to be said, really. Oh, apart from like, yeah, thanks again, Evelyn, for running the workshop over the weekend. It was awesome. I did sit in as well, even though you didn't even know about this, but like I was eating some Belgian fries with my family while I was sitting in on the workshop as well. So that was cool. And I gave a little bit of secondhand fear to my mom because she was like, can they hear us? Should we be quiet? I was like, no, I'm muted. It's fine. She was like, oh, okay. So that was fun. So yeah, we have that going on. And then next week, or should I say, I think this week, I'm so out of it. I've just been gone for a weekend. Let me quickly check our calendar. In the Discord, on the 21st, this Saturday, we have another workshop with Andrew Little, who's going to be talking about how to work with cameras in Unreal. So, yeah, we're going to be diving into that over the weekend, which is going to be cool. Yes, so it's all kicking off, getting a good schedule. Hey, Will! But yeah. Little quick introduction over. If you are new to the stream, feel free to ask anything about environment art, working in the games industry, anything that I can help out with. I am a senior environment artist in the video games industry myself. I have been for almost 10 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about. So if you have any question on how I can help, feel free to let me know during this feedback session and we'll talk about it. So the first question already came in from Jose. Do you think I can work first as a 3D hard surface artist and then when I'm well established in the video games industry, transition to an environment artist role? I mean, you can, yeah. My question would be why? Right? Like, why would you try to get into a hard surface position first and then transition into an environment artist role? Right? That would be the main question, really. Because if you really want to do environment art first, then I would focus on that, right? That's all I'm gonna add to that, really. Because, yeah, I don't want people to... There's this, I wouldn't call it a misconception, but there's this tendency to look at the games industry and kind of look at the numbers and just be like, ooh, if I want to get in really quick, I'm going to do this and then transition into the actual thing I want to do. The thing that you're forgetting there isn't you're spending like 4 to 5 years working on something that you don't really enjoy to then spend another 4 to 5 years again to get into the things that you enjoy, but now you have a full-time job and you have to do it after your job. Which is crazy, right? If you really break it down to the numbers. Jose is saying, I like making props and game assets and vehicles and weapons, but I also really like doing environments. And I think I can make a 3D hard surface portfolio faster. I mean, with bigger companies, you have to pick a specialization, right? That doesn't mean that once you're in, you can kind of switch, but you need to get in with a specialization that you want to pick, right? You're saying assets, vehicles, and weapons. Those are, for most companies, again, I'm focused very on AAA, they're pretty separate by themselves, as far as I know. Take into account that I'm also looking at it from an environment art perspective, right? So take that into account too. Will is saying, in my experience, if the project demands it, usually it's not a problem to switch. I did it before twice, but I agree with Tim. I think it makes sense to just go for the role that you want. If you want to be an environment artist, for example. Yeah. I mean, I know a couple of people. Yeah, they got into the games industry as like, ooh, I am gonna do this. And then they started doing the actual job and they were like, ooh, I actually like it less than I thought I would. And then they just like make the switch, right? Like over time. It's not like an immediate thing. It takes a lot of time to then build up your portfolio again and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that you can't. You definitely can. It just takes time. Hello, Atakan. My passion is environment art, but I really like creating 3D, like detailed 3D models like props, assets, weapons, and vehicle. Yeah, you have to pick. In my opinion, that's what I would do. Pick one. Because they're like pretty separate, right? Like obviously there's a little bit of crossover with some workflows maybe, but I would definitely pick one and pick the one that you want to do the most and pour your heart and soul into that one. Yeah, it is hard to pick. It is. Like if you're I don't know your skill level, right? But like let's say for people that are new, just as a piece of advice, it's always going to take longer than you think it will to get into the games industry. If you then have to grind things out for like the next 4 to 5 years, right? Depending on if you go to uni, how much time you put in and all that kind of stuff, you want to be spending that time on a thing that you actually want to do. It's possible to start out as a concept artist and eventually become a senior environment artist. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that would actually, yeah. In my opinion, you learn so much from just even trying to distill concept art, right? Like you learn so much by just looking at art and like trying to do stuff yourself. Marius is asking a good question, but I don't know how specific I can be. Let's see. Let's try to answer that question. So the question is, what's your favorite game engine in-house or other? And also what's your least one and why? Yeah, you would assume that you would assume that you would know the engine, right? But like, so when I started in the games industry, like, I sound like such an old man when I say that, but like, it's not that long ago, I swear. We were working with an engine that didn't even have like an import tool. So like, if you wanted to import an asset into the engine, as in like, I want to have a display in the game, you had to type things into a notepad. Yeah. So that's where it kind of starts, right? So yeah, if we're setting the bar that low, I feel that the only way is up, really, right? Because every engine had its like pros and cons. So like working with like some of the engines at Ubisoft, they were like really focused on like open world stuff, right? And they were really good at doing a bunch of open world stuff. But they also had like severe limitations because they were built up from like most of them from like CryEngine, right? So they were like a branch of CryEngine in the beginning, and then they just developed their own tech on top of it until it was like unrecognizable from CryEngine, and now it's their own thing. So that means that they had like a lot of really, really interesting tools, and they worked really well for open world creation. But also they were still built on like a whole bunch of like old tech that is just like really unwieldy to use. So like sometimes it would take like an hour to open the engine, which even that, they would have like special build tools that it would basically sync all you need. So like it would get like all the latest updates. It would then open the engine before you get in to avoid you from having to open the engine yourselves and wait for an hour, right? So that was all built in as like a tool set to kind of avoid just like the long waiting times. But yeah, I can't really be too specific about it. Because, yeah. I mean, if there's one thing that I can say is that no matter which engine you use, if you're going to use it for professional development, you are going to hate it at the end. I feel that's just like an uncommon rule between game devs. I've heard people working with Unreal. I've heard people working with Unity. I've heard people working with all sorts of in-house engines, and they all have their own flaws. They're just different flaws. So it's just like, yeah, everyone is going to bitch and moan about their own engine. So yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you get to the point where it's like, hey, look, I can easily import an object into the game now. This is way better than I had it, right? And then if you're a junior getting in, and if that is like your lowest bar, and you're like, hey, look, there's a bunch of stuff broken here. Like, I still have it in my head that I couldn't even like import an asset. So, you know, the bar just shifts over time. Yeah, that's a good question. I wish we didn't have like NDAs and I could just like talk openly about that stuff um without having to second guess myself. Would be awesome. Jose is saying, how many hours do you recommend I should take to make at least a decent portfolio for an environment? It's not about the amount of hours. It depends on a lot of different factors, right? Like, it depends on your skill level. It depends on like the workflows that you already know. Like, there's no shortcut. In art, there's no shortcut. Some people just have the gift of being like a good artist from the beginning and they get to spend less hours. Some people, they just have to do it the hard way and they have to spend more hours to make up for the fact that they might not have the gift or be talented or whatever you want to assign to that, right? So, yeah. And then also, trying to define at least decent, that is like a whole loaded little section there. Because how do you quantify at least decent, or let's say, how do you quantify a good portfolio? Right? Even that is like, I have no idea. Because I can look at it from my personal artistic perspective, right? I can look at it from like a studio perspective where hireability comes in. Or I can also look at it from like a local studio perspective where like if you're aiming to get into like a local studio, like the bar is going to be slightly higher, slightly lower. And it's just, there's so many things, right? So even trying to define a good portfolio, it is really difficult. I think we all have in our minds what are the best people out there, right? Like the people that are setting the bar, right? We all have like a sprinkling of an idea, but the people that are good, they usually stay relatively invisible. I would honestly consider myself to be good, not great. Especially, yeah. When I was a student, I wouldn't even call myself good, to be honest. Fuck's sake. Let's see. I'm starting to learn about environment art for games. What do you recommend I learn first, and what should I post first on my portfolio? What you should post first in your portfolio is the first. Oh, thanks, Will. I appreciate it. But yeah, we gave enough. We gave each other shit on the podcast that we did together about like our student portfolio. So we've seen the depths, you know. Let's get back to the question. So what should I put first on my portfolio? It's just anything, really. In the beginning, I can guarantee you that the first thing that you're going to post on your portfolio is going to get removed by the time that you're going to apply. The first thing honestly doesn't matter. What I think is important is that you need to get into the habit of posting, and posting a lot. Because what I don't want you to do is that you hold on to a piece of art for such a long time and you want to keep making it better and better and better, and then you never post it, and then you just keep working on this one thing forever. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to... Oh, there we go. Battery's dead. Oh well, we're just gonna keep going then. Let's switch it over to this one. Yeah, so I think that's the most important thing, is that you get into the habit of posting a lot and posting as frequently as you can, just so that you can reduce the barrier of you actually wanting to post. That's what I would say there. And if you want to learn environment art for video games, it kind of depends on where you're at. I would just start with making individual assets, right? Just singular assets. Start modeling in Blender. Take it from there. If you want to get into environment art, you kind of need to switch your mindset to building more stuff in less unique ways. So using tileable textures, using trim sheet textures, like some of those things. Back to the scheduled tech issues. Yep, exactly. I think there's something wrong with like my battery charger from my camera. So yeah, I don't know what's happening with that, because it is plugged in. It just switches off. Which is Weird. Double check that. Anyways, that's not gonna stop us today. Atakan is asking, can I ask you what the best way to determine my own stylized material pipeline? Let's say a huge outdoor scene RPG game. I just use 3D Painter, but I think I have to use Substance Designer too. I think honestly we're gonna go a bit high level again, but I don't think you can come up with the best way of your own material pipeline by just thinking about it in a vacuum. You have to try it out and keep improving, and that's how you make the best pipeline. Because you named two programs, right? You can do all you want with either of those programs. Like, you could, but it just depends on what you need to do, right? In a very general sense, 3D Painter is better at making individual assets, where 3D Substance Designer is more made for tileable textures and all that kind of stuff, right? So if you're focusing on like a big outdoor scene, and we're keeping it very generic, I would go for Designer rather than Painter. Anyone got tips on project paralysis? I'm having trouble getting momentum after working on other stuff. It's too good to not finish, but I'm spinning my wheels. There's nothing wrong with just, if you know that you're spinning your wheels, just doing something else for a little bit, and then you get refreshed until you don't spin your wheels on it anymore, right? There's nothing really wrong with that. Everyone kind of has their own ways of getting out of that rut. And it's always a balance between, like, first of all, trying to push through, right? I think that is something that is like very underestimated and not even talked about because it's not like the correct thing to say. But sometimes there's going to be moments that are going to suck, and the only way that you can get through them, or the quickest way to get through them, is just pushing through. If that moment keeps lasting for like days or weeks, for like a long time, then it's time to take a step back. Go for long walks, do a different project, get the creative juices back with something else, and then switch back to whatever you wanted to do, right? That could also be a case that works. In my personal opinion, and this is literally only talking about myself, right? Is I prefer to be consistent, and I try to remove as much of the decision making that goes into whether I want to work on a project or not. So that means that I now have a schedule where every day after work, I work for a set amount of hours, and I don't even think about if I'm gonna work, I just do it. The only decision that I make right now is because I'm also running Beyond Extent, and I'm running my own community, all that kind of stuff. The decision is between, do I spend it on educational resources or do I spend it on my own work? And that is a little bit more of an emotional decision sometimes, where sometimes I just can't be bothered. I had a busy week and I just want to do some art after work, right? Then I'll spend it on doing personal work. Most of the time though, it just comes down to like, hey, this is the biggest priority. If I don't do it, it's going to bite me in the ass in like a couple of weeks. So I better get to it, whether I want to or not. Yeah. And there are going to be some times that I just don't want to, and that you just have to push through. Yeah. So I tried to give you like a lot of context there, right, Connor? I think it's a good question, and I think a lot of people struggle with this. So I tried to give you like a couple of things that you could do there. I think I just had too much of a plan in my head, and now the other stuff came up. It's just not there now. Reorganizing my project and the time is probably the key. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that could definitely be it. There's also this saying, I don't know where it comes from, and I don't know if it's 100% correct, but like a good plan only lasts until you get punched in the face, right? And if you think about like a creative project, like you're usually in most people's position that we're talking about now, you're still trying to learn a lot of stuff too, right? Which means that you have a bunch of unknown variables that you have between now and the end of the project. And they can be a minor speed bump. They can be like a big hurdle, but you don't know that until you get there. And at that point, you just have to be like, oh, well, didn't see this coming. Okay, let me deviate. Let me really research this little topic that I need to research. And then let's get back into it, right? Like once you have all that knowledge. And then over time, what is going to happen is that those speed bumps, they become less and less. And that's where you can get into like, okay, I can plan a project now and I can get like a somewhat more accurate representation of how I'm going to hit the final stages. I've taken a hit. I've taken some hits on this time. Yay. Oh, that's a good suggestion too, Will. So yeah. It's easiest to scope down, focus on the small part of your original plan and finish that, and then you can move on. That way you can move on, but still get to finish. Yeah, I think that's great. I usually talk about this in the forms of like building towards a save point, right? Especially as environment artists, I find this like sort of mentality where like, hey, look, we're gonna focus on like what I need to do to make the scene work. And then whatever I want to keep building on afterwards, that's fine. But then at least I still have that main scene. Because I guarantee you, I don't know what the percentage of this would be, but I would say that like almost 80 to 90% are going to get to that point where they finish a small part of the scene and they're like, hey, look, this was awesome. I'm going to move on to the next thing. But you don't want to encounter that sort of emotion when you're like only 10% in, you know? Yeah, that's a good point as well. Scoping down always helps. It's a good exercise too. Let's see. There's a relevant question, so maybe we can tackle that one first. Let's see. Yeah, so David is saying, how do you set a deadline for an environment you're still not fully happy with, but you've already spent a lot of time working on? Yeah, I think looking back, like Will's suggestion might also work here, right? Just scope down. Because what you don't want to do is like, oh my god, I still need to do like 3 months of work to get this to like a final idea. Where in most cases, what you could do is scope down, spend a couple more weeks on it, like maybe 1 or 2, and then just be done with it, right? And then you can move on to the next thing. We gotta be very, very cognizant of like the emotional load that we put onto ourselves when we put so much of our own work into our art, right? So we need to be very careful in how we manage that as well. And you recommend a good tutorial or course for environment art? I only know the one, honestly. Well, 2, I guess. Like CGMA has good courses. CG Masters Academy, CGMA, and Tiago Klafke has a good course on stylized environment creation. I forgot what it's called. Stylized environment masterclass or something like that. Environment art masterclass from Tiago Klafke. Those are the 2 ones that I can recommend because I know environment art mastery. Thank you, Evelyn. So those are the 2 that I can kind of recommend. CGMA obviously offers like more courses. Yeah, I've heard some good stuff from Tiago's one. What tips would you give to someone who just started as a junior and wants to develop his career? A couple of tips: write down everything you did you think went well. Write that down in a notebook. Let's say you finished a prop under a deadline, write that down. Let's say you did really good on set dressing like a certain area and you're really proud of it, write that down. Because by that time that you are going to be in a position to negotiate, so let's say in your yearly review or your one-on-one with your lead or whoever that might be, or your manager, that you have that list that you can be like, hey, look, here's all the stuff that I did well. And that gives you a lot of negotiating power in that conversation. Another tip that I would say is ask questions and ask a lot of them. If you're ever stuck, try something for 5 to 10 minutes. If you're still stuck, ask it. Don't be like me and try to spend a bunch of time on something because you were so afraid of asking the question. All the people around you have all been there as well. So just ask the question. It's going to save you a ton of time. And especially in the beginning, it gets you to talk to a lot of people, which is really great because that's honestly how I got the majority of my jobs after the first one, is just by knowing people, talking to people, genuinely getting to know people and becoming friends with people. And they then knew another person who then could recommend me for a job and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, it's a small industry, so being social in that way can definitely help. Could you give me a breakdown on how mentorships work with you? Do we pick a project or do we have a whip, or is it question by question basis? Currently I don't really have like any mentorships open, and I'm not really planning on opening them soon. The way that normally works is that it can be either or. Like, usually people come in, if they don't have a project, we start from scratch and we build a project ourselves. If you have a whip, like, we literally go through it, we build a plan together, and we just take it week by week, right? So every week we sit down together, and then we build a plan for next week. And yeah, that's usually how we go about it. Where the first session that we do is a little bit longer, so that we can talk about like goal setting and building like a proper plan. Even if you decide not to go on with the mentorship, you still have a plan in your back pocket as well. So that's what I try to do in like the first week. That's why that first session is longer as well. How are you saying hello? Just popping in to say hello. Hope you're doing well. Yeah. Thank you so much for popping in, Harry. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well too. I watched a lot of environment tutorials, including trim sheets, baking, textile density, etc. But I still can't understand that the creating environment is a linear or a non-linear process. Even I try to create examples. Yeah, so you have to do a lot. As in, you have to create a lot of stuff. That's why you brought it up as well, but I don't think just doing a couple of tutorials and expecting like quick outcomes is not going to work in environment art. What I would say is you need to have a good understanding of individual asset creation first, before you can then dive into trim sheets and textile density and all that kind of stuff. So start with a simple prop, make a high to low poly, bake that down, texture it, make proper UVs, like all that kind of stuff that you need to do to make a singular asset. Because all that stuff that you do with a singular asset is going to build a context for the more modular and reusable stuff that you're going to be making down the line. So your trim sheets, your tileable textures, and all that kind of stuff. But in general, creating an environment is like a very non-linear process. That's why on a grand scheme of things, like you usually go from like a singular asset to a small diorama, which is just like a couple of assets that are just like clumped together. And then you go potentially a little bit bigger and bigger. And that's how you keep building up the skills that you need to then be able to build whatever you want. And then, yeah, after a couple of years, maybe a decade, then an entire city, you know? Who knows? So we got some new people dropping in. I just want to say another reminder that you can ask me anything about working in game dev, environment art, or just any career advice really for working in video games industry. Feel free to drop it in the chat. Let's see, did I miss any question? I don't think so, right? Hey, the apples. Good to see you here. Hello, McFal. Yeah, it is. It's not an easy career to be in. It definitely takes a lot of time, especially if you want to be self-taught. It's tricky because there's so much to learn. There's so many different things, and it constantly keeps changing as well, which is also part of the excitement for me. But yeah, it is demanding. That I'll say. All right. Should we have a look at some feedback then? Let's see. Let's start with Willump. I think for today. Oh no, I didn't finish it. Dang it. So I didn't make any annotations for Paulina, but I think for the rest of them I did. So let's do one more question from Slate, and then we can go into some feedback here. But still feel free to ask any questions in the meantime. So is it better to take time and create standalone assets to improve skills, or just start with a portfolio piece and learn and improve as you go? I don't really see the difference there necessarily. I mean, if we're talking about it from like a broader perspective, right? Like sometimes you do these like smaller projects that don't really have value as like a portfolio piece, that are then still valuable for just you picking up the skill that you wanted to learn by that, right? So in that respect, there will be a lot of projects that you just do to kind of figure something out, and then it's like, okay, cool, I learned that thing. Let's move on. Because I don't think everything should be a portfolio piece. Because a portfolio piece is literally just like a showcase for like all the best stuff that you can do, right? And I have a ton of abandoned projects. Like absolute shit ton of abandoned projects. Last time I looked, and this is after I did the cleanup, I had like 100 gigs of files that was just like abandoned. And this is from like all the way back in uni to like, I think the first couple of years in the industry or something like that. But yeah. And now I just use it as an excuse to keep working on my medieval scene, because I don't abandon it, but it's also never finished, you know? So, hi. I don't have abandoned projects anymore. Look, 100% success rate. Oh. Okay, let's have a look. So Willump is starting a new outdoor environment to improve my folio skills. Every feedback is welcome. Cool. I'd love to know how to manage the landscape road, because the spline tool will be hard to use it on intersections. So I noted this down here. So I'm using the landscape spline tool for intersections as well. I don't think it's that big of a deal when used on intersections, especially once you then just layer stuff on top of it, right? So I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. What you could do is you could do some smart... Yeah, there's like smart ways of hiding those intersections by using decals, using another mesh, anything like that. You can kind of creatively work your way around it, right? So I don't think not using landscape splines because you're afraid of an intersection, I think you should still use them, because they are really powerful. Also, I just wanted to bring up that this image that you're trying to recreate has no intersections anyway. So I don't think you should be worried about like having to make an intersection at all. So that helps to our benefit. I saw that on Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, they used the meshes to add irregularity for junctions of the road and grass like that. So that's this image down here. Yes. So these are like embankment pieces, and depending on what you want to do with them, right? Like usually they have like these like really cool shapes. They have some like really cool embankments in that game. I know because I looked at them too. And that is basically this stuff, right? So I did a little bit of a breakdown here where you can have number one, you have your landscape spline. Then number two are your meshes. So these are literally like embankment meshes that you just like you add into the terrain. And once you then blend them together using RVT, runtime virtual textures, which basically sample the texture from the terrain, and then you can kind of like add them onto your mesh and blend them with your actual texture, they kind of blend seamlessly together. So that's something to have a look at. If you just type in like RVT Unreal, you're gonna find a lot about that stuff. And then anything like this could be a combination of like a landscape spline mesh or a decal. So you could kind of use like a lot of combinations here. Just get this looking really good. That's basically what I'm doing in like a very similar fashion, even though my interpretation is more chaotic, right? The puddles that you see, that's all just decals. And then the rest of it is just a landscape spline, and that's mainly it. Like I'm only using like the landscape itself, landscape spline, and then on top of that I use decals. Yeah, you can kind of see the same thing happening here. What they sometimes do is in larger open worlds, they kind of have like these landscape splines set up so that they have a bunch of these decals and stuff like already embedded into it, right? So that you just draw a spline and it basically scatters like a bunch of decals and stuff on top of it as well. But yeah, that's the way that I would do it. Now let's have a look at these textures. So the first one, the grass, it kind of looks okay. It can definitely be improved. Like there's a lot of AO between the grass, right? So like the AO is too much. That's the first thing that I would kind of have a look at. But also like, honestly, context for this matters because you can make this stuff look really, really good. And then if you start looking at like the grass texture underneath here somewhere, right? It doesn't even matter because you're not going to see it. Right? So I just bring that up in a way where it depends on the context that you're going to be using in, because you might not even need to go that crazy with some of these textures. It only matters if you then want to separate separate specifically the grass one off and make it like a bigger piece on your portfolio, right? You want to display that. But in that case, you could still just pick the best one and then just display that you did that one, right? So you can kind of like cherry pick and kind of curate your portfolio to the best work that you're doing. Like for example, this one. Like this one has a really good base. I like all the variation that's going on. I think the normal or the height on these stones is like a little bit too much. But again, usually what I do is I try to balance this inside of Unreal, like in context, because then you get a better appreciation of all these details, right? Because now what I'm doing is I'm doing a comparison between the normal information of these guys compared to the normal information of these guys. And what I might say now is that, oh, this needs to be turned down. But actually, what it could be is that this needs to be turned up instead. Right? And that depends on context. So yeah, always see everything in context. That's definitely going to help. Let's see. But yeah, this is a great image, by the way. I do really love this image. It looks so good. I'm kind of tempted to also recommend you to do it vertically. Because I feel like it's such a good composition because it is vertically done. I feel like if you're trying to mash this into like a horizontal composition, I don't think it's gonna work. It's gonna be less elegant. So I'll leave that to you, right? It's up to you what you want to do with that. But yeah, the reason why I'm saying so is because I had a very similar art piece where I kind of need to do like a big overhaul to kind of make it fit into like a horizontal or like a landscape aspect ratio, where the original was a portrait ratio. And I honestly, in hindsight, should have kept it portrait. Cool. Yeah, good stuff, the apples. Looking forward to seeing this come together. Got a good head start, got a good concept. So yeah, looking forward to seeing this come together. Cool, let's jump around a little bit. Let's go to designer next. Designer is making the Blue City, which is built on, oh my god, the city of Chefchaouen? I have no idea if that was the right pronunciation, but we'll go with it. I started to work on the floors, the stairs, and the mosque in the background mountains. Planning to add some edge decals to the buildings. Right now, I'm looking for feedback on the overall composition and the background buildings. Okay, that sounds good. I kind of did a little bit of an overpaint already. But to add more context to the apples work, you rarely see environment art pieces these days that aren't horizontal. It could be a good way to stand out. Yeah, I think so. And yeah, it would look sick because I'm imagining like the ArtStation post where you can't even fit it into like one image. You kind of have to do like a little bit of scrolling, but it's going to be bigger because it takes up just more screen space. I think it could look sick. Cool. First of all, this is looking great. I like where this is going so far. You were specifically asking for some feedback on, yeah, the composition and like the background buildings and all that stuff, right? So I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on the buildings and how we make them more interesting, right? So first of all, what we need to do here is we need to focus on the silhouettes. The silhouettes of the buildings are always, well, the silhouettes of anything really are the most important thing to be worried about. So I had a look at the images that you shared here, and you can kind of see that there's like a lot of like interesting like silhouette breakups with like little chimneys, little things, like little constructions like on the rooftops. There's a bunch of stuff happening on the roofs, which we could translate that as well. Right? You have this like very stacked approach here, and it has like a lot of interest to the silhouette of the building. Comparatively to the buildings that you have, it is very, very cube-like, right? It doesn't really add a lot of interest to the scene. So it just means that we need to add more variation to the whole thing. So look at the roofs first. Like potentially take something like this that you have down here, place it on like a couple of roof pieces, and that's already going to help a lot. Then add these chimneys on top of it as well. They kind of add like a little silhouette break, which could be really cool too. And then honestly, just try to come up with like clever little solutions onto like breaking up like the rest of the silhouettes, right? So you could almost have, what is it, like a rooftop here that kind of goes into like two ways. Right, and then maybe you have like a fence with like another building on top of this one. But that's what I would really focus on first, is just really thinking about and like repurposing like a lot of stuff that you already have, right? Because you have this roof, and you have the building materials to make like smaller chimneys and stuff too. So we can just cobble new stuff together and make the actual silhouettes of the building way more interesting than they are currently. Right, let's see. Also, a second point here. Well, let me go here first. So when it comes to these bigger blocks, what we also need to look into is breaking up the repetition, especially because these windows are always the same. They're very repetitive, right? Especially if they're repeated a lot on a singular building. So we need to break that up as well somehow. So again, just looking at some of the silhouettes that we have here, even just having like a singular window with like 4 little windows with a shared roof, it adds a difference, right? And then these guys down here, they don't have a roof. This building feels very unique by basically using the components that you have already. But we need to vary them up a lot more than what is currently happening. So yeah, we need to do that here. So that could mean that like, oh, this little section has like an extra window now, and it has like a connecting thingy, and maybe this one doesn't have a window up here, right? And then maybe in this area we can actually open the top floor and actually make it like a little bit of like a patio kind of situation. Made like 4 building variations and I kept duplicating them around. Same for the background buildings as well. Yeah, yeah. And that is the thing that we are super, what's the best word of saying this? Like super, we are super quick to recognize any patterns that happen, right? So that's why in a case like this, where you have by design and by nature, like a lot of repeating things happening in the scene, we need to find ways to creatively make them not look repeating. So yeah, just stacking things on top of each other, scaling things up and down, adding more variation to the buildings, that's going to help a lot. Especially for like a picturesque, like little town like this, like a lot of it is going to feel like it's handmade. There's going to be a lot of variation. So we need to add that in there. So yeah, break up any repetition you see. And it also comes down to like the buildings in the back. It's like I tried to do here, right? Like bringing this building out more, having 2 windows here, filling these windows down here, maybe having like a rooftop that's slanting. And then maybe, I don't know, maybe it slants here. Maybe there's like window here. 2 windows there. And already you can kind of see that like that breaks up the space way more just by doing that. And then you can really continue that on all the buildings, right? Because it's not only like the spaces that I highlighted here, it's also like this building over here and this building over here. What can also help, and this is more like an additional layer that you can add on top of it, is doing things like little cables or little drainage pipes or stuff like that. The reason why I call them out specifically is because they're usually relatively simple to make, but once you have them, like they're super flexible in the way that you use them. Because if you really think about it, like a drainage pipe, you know, you can map that onto a trim sheet, or you can kind of make that into like a unique kit, but let's say we'll keep it as a trim sheet. That means that now you can just make whatever shape you want, map it on the trim sheet, and you're good to go. Same with cables, right? You can have like a small trim sheet with five variations of the cables, and you can make an infinite amount of cables. Right? It's just a little bit more modeling time, but you have a lot of you have a lot of flexibility. Yeah. The last thing that I will say is try to separate the background and the buildings more. We can do that in a couple of separate ways, and I think you have a beautiful example here where you have these like very unnatural colors, right? Like white and blue. Like you don't really see them in nature, apart from the sky, of course, but you don't really see them a lot in nature. And then you have the contrast of like the green hills in the background, the green and rocky cliffs. Where if we look at your image, it's almost like if I remove like all my scribbles and we zoom out a little bit, is that apart from that shadow, like these colors, they kind of blend together. So there's not that like natural contrast that we have, which could be good if we bring that back. And then also you can accentuate that with like a little fog card in the background to kind of separate it out atmospherically as well. Let's see what's happening in the chat. So especially if there's not that much variation with the color, which seems to be a part of the vibe from the ref, you need more variation with the shapes. Yeah. Maybe just making some additional modules to slap onto the buildings will be enough. Yeah, I think you have the building parts there, right? As in like the materials and some of the shapes. Like it's literally just like, I don't know, scaling them and like making them slightly different and just bashing them in there again. Yeah. You also look dirty but not damaged enough. Yeah, I think so designer's going to be working on edge decals and all that kind of stuff too. Yeah, so I'm curious what that is going to do to like the buildings. Because I think you're right. They kind of look like very clean. And especially where you have like these sharp ridges, you do want to break them up. Oh yeah, even stuff like this is pretty cool. You just have like this little section that's like carved out of it. And even looking at the line here, it kind of just like squiggles all over. It's pretty cool. Yep. Cool stuff, designer. This is a cool place you picked as well. So great stuff. I do want to see like the vibrancy. I'm almost tempted to kind of do like a color grade like this, where yeah, it brings out the contrast between the blues and the yellows a bit more. Yeah. Good stuff, designer. Thank you for sharing your work. No worries, no worries. Happy to help. Let's have a look at the next one. So Cameron is working on a hero asset for a New York apartment style scene. I'm using this project as an entry into learning Unreal. Okay, that's awesome. Currently being rendered in Marmoset. That is good. I did make a note here that when you're using Unreal as like the endpoint and you're making a scene, right? Try to get it in there as quickly as possible, because that's going to give you the best sort of benchmark to work towards, right? Because you might be working using Marmoset as like the benchmark, but you might have to change things up for Unreal because it renders it slightly different. I think Marmoset, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, maybe Will can shine on this, has like ray trace enable in the beginning, so it's gonna look better than in Unreal by default. Yeah, it would be good to get it in like the place where you're actually gonna do the presentation. It's still fine to have the presentation separate, like on the portfolio, right? Let's say you do a breakdown. I think that's fine, but then at least it's balanced towards Unreal. The question that Cameron is asking is: there's anything that is currently being thrown it off? There aren't much environmental reflections currently, and the clear plastic probably needs some improving. Yeah. Yeah, I've started just some reference hunting. I noticed that there's like a slight discoloration on the plastic, probably to do with age. Usually this is something that comes from like just being exposed to the sun, right, for like a while. It's just like sun aging, which could be pretty cool. There's a slight discoloration. What I'm trying to hint at is just more use, right? It could be cool to have like all these little scratches and all that kind of stuff happening on the top cover as well. And then maybe some like cracks from, I'm imagining that it's like, oh, it's been moved a couple of times. So you kind of have like these scratches and cracks on top of it as well. Kind of leaning into the more used part, because the study you have now looks really good, but it's also like really subtle as well. Which is not a bad thing. But yeah, I think having something more unique could definitely help its case. And talking about like more unique stuff, I feel like the stuff that you have going already looks really good. But again, it's very subtle, right? And it almost feels like it's like a slight dusting on top of the asset. Where it would be nice to see some bigger parts are just like used. You can kind of see like the button has been used, so there's like discoloration on the edges. You kind of have like all these like bigger dust specks that are adding like some variation to the surface as well. So yeah, that is what I would recommend. Go more with the approach of actually just going in and like hand painting a bunch of random stuff. And really take your time with that and build like a couple of separate layers that just like build on top of each other. Hey, Giacomo! I've got larger dust fibers in there. The plastic is obscuring it. Honestly, if I can't see it from here, like you can kind of see it, but I would expect more stuff like this, like little granules, little bits of just like random stuff, right? Yeah, this is looking really nice though, Cameron. I mean, really, really cool stuff. This is awesome to have a look at. Can't wait to see it in the scene itself. It's gonna be cool. Nice one. Thanks, Cameron. Sweet. Let's randomize it a little bit. Let's go to rat. Dun-dun. Little server rat. Let's see. Do you have some tips on how to improve the scaling? When I look at the ref, the door seems very high compared to everything else. Is it the camera angle? I have struggled with this for the past week. So when it comes to scaling, you would first have a look at the, well, in your case, like your concept, right? Start there, but have a look at some actual references as well. I unfortunately didn't have the time to add some additional ref, but I was looking at like, okay, what does like a door in an alleyway look like, right? And that is going to give you way better context than just looking at the concept alone, right? Like, we need to kind of get to the core of whatever we're trying to make and see if we can distill it from there, right? Because someone's concept art is already going to be an interpretation of what the real world stuff is, right? So we need to get to the source as quick as possible. But even from the concept, we can kind of see that like the thickness of the frame is slightly different, where yours feels a little bit more chunky, right? And I think that definitely doesn't help with the perception of the proportions, right? So definitely slimming that frame up could already help. And let's have a look. I don't think it's gonna, not that it's supposed to, but I don't think it's gonna match 100%. Kind of seeing if we can I get away with something here. Don't think so. We'll just go back. Let's see. Yeah. Definitely the frame would be one thing. I think you also mentioned this before, but like the wooden pallets. Right? Like having a look at how they're built as well. And that actually brings up another topic, like there's some detail missing from like the wood frame, for example, the door frame, where I would expect it to be kind of like modeled, right? Or at least, I know that it's like early on, but like textured, or at least like beveled. I think that's also going to help a lot with like the translation of those shapes. It's either like a physical bevel, or we're going to do a normal bevel, right? We're going to bake it down from a high poly or whatever you want to do just to get those bevels. Like both work fine. We just need to make sure that we have some sort of read on the silhouette. Because right now it does feel like it's really basic, right? It feels like a basic 3D model that is, it's almost like for an older generation, like PlayStation game or something, right? And that also doesn't help. Looking at this lamp, we can have a look at those proportions too. I feel like the lamp is a bit chunkier and that the window is smaller. So smaller, and then we make maybe not that much. And then if we give that like a bigger lip as well, I think that's also going to be helpful. And then giving the plate, I know we're no longer talking about proportions really, but it's more about like creating believability from some of the shapes, right? Because it's not necessarily like proportions are usually not just like, oh, change this one thing and it's going to be fine. It's the relationship of everything in the scene that makes it believable, right? Cool. And then the second question is, how would you go about making the textures pop a bit more? I've been trying to do it in the Borderlands style, like giving everything somewhat of a black outline. Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, interesting. I didn't even realize that was happening. So, let's see. So I know one way of getting that, right? So if you want to get a Borderlands outline on all your meshes, a quick way of doing that is, let's say you have, this is top down, right? So bear with me for a second. So this is your top down mesh. It's a cube. You basically take the same geometry, make it like slightly bigger. So you just use like a thicken, which is like Alt S, I think, in Blender. So you just like scale it up slightly. What you do then is you flip the normals on that mesh, and then you just make it black or something like that. So what that is going to do, let's say we're looking at it from here, we're not going to see it, right? Because like we flipped the normals, so it's going to be invisible. However, we are going to see like the outline here, because we are looking at it from this angle, from this angle. So that means that we're going to get an outline on our mesh that way. This is the easiest thing to do. There's probably a way better way because we don't want to be duplicating like our geo, right? But this is the easiest thing to do for a static scene without having to delve into like a bunch of like post-process like kind of stuff. Yeah. So mesh. So we wanna do a mesh. We wanna resize. So we wanna scale, and then we wanna flip normals, right? That would be the easiest way of doing it. Because that is not a... The effect that they do with Borderlands is not an effect that is done by encoding that into the texture. That is something that is done to the mesh or in post-processing or something that comes on top of everything, right? Yes. So that's the way that I would go about like creating that little outline. Hello, Jeremiah. Good to see you here. We are going camless today because we have some difficulties. I think my battery gave up because of the heat. Yeah, hope you're doing well. Let's see. And then making the textures pop a bit more. Let me see, it's been a while since I looked at Borderlands, but I think they kind of go into like a more sculpty kind of vibe, right? Like everything is kind of just like get bashed together, kind of sculpted, kind of chunkier looking as well. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, obviously they do a lot of stuff to let's see. I'm trying to find an example here. Borderlands 3 style. You almost just have to go like pretty graphic with like your textures, right? So let's see, there was a good example here. Let's just take this one. We'll have to deal with it. This is like a pretty simple example. But you just have to go like semi-graphical with things. Right, so try to recreate some of that into the texture. And then when it comes to like the outline on the edges, that's where you want to rely on like this technique. What's happening over here. I think a combination of the two is going to be pretty good. Yeah. Best of luck with that, Dinant. Best of luck. Let's keep it moving. Let's go to Migval next. I know you're in the chat, so let's have a look. Feedback for this week. Slate is saying, I think there are some videos about making a custom shader in the Borderlands style. Yeah, it is. There are probably going to be videos out there, right? But depending on the skill level of the person, it might be really difficult. If I were to put myself in their shoes, like it could be really difficult. Contour shader detects isn't hard in post-processing shaders. I followed the tutorial in like an hour. Just moving the screen space X pixel and dividing it onto itself. See, but like, I mean, oh, it's just moving the screen space X pixels and dividing it onto itself. That is not making a lot of sense to people right now. Right? So, I mean, yeah, sure, you can follow a tutorial, but yeah, it is. I think once you kind of get like a base understanding of these things, right? Like then doing these things is not too difficult, right? And like usually when, for example, because even when you say this to me, right, it's like, okay, moving the screen space X pixel, I can visualize it, but then I'm just like, okay, how the fuck do I do that in like a material? Like it doesn't make sense. And then I watch someone else do it, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, I'm on it. Yeah, yeah. There's probably like a ton of videos out there. Let's have a look. Compared to last week, diving into the feedback from McVal now. Compared to last week, are the rocks and the cliffs looking more integrated and natural? And are the noise levels still fine? So, I think it is still looking very samey. And I think now that we have like a full facade like this one here, I think that you can also start to see what is happening, right? And is that the edge wear is becoming really, really noticeable. And I think what is also becoming apparent is that what we said last time, right? Is that the shapes are very similar. So it's almost like you have a block here, 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 block here, block here. Like, this might be a quick test, right? But like that's the stuff that you kind of want to avoid. Because it is somewhat better here, but it still suffers from the same thing. Like it's a lot of similar shapes that are happening. Even though, like again, like you're trying to do a good job of breaking it up, right? But it's literally, I think, spending a lot more time really taking in like a bunch of references and really trying to replicate like certain faces, like certain cliff faces, right? Like focusing on the bigger picture rather than focusing on and this is just working on a hunch, right? I think what is happening is that you might be spending so much time trying to refine the technical side of it, like the tool side of it, which makes sense, right? Because that's what you want to do. That you kind of get lost in that world and forget to focus on like the bigger picture. And it's just a huge assumption from my part, right? But that's kind of the thing that I'm feeling. Yeah, that is honestly like the next big thing to look at is, okay, I have like all this stuff. Like how do I visually make it more interesting? And it's going to be a combination of let me note this down. Right? So how to create interest is a combination of your modules, right? Like having good modules to play around with, but also the placement of those modules too. Right, so it's a combination. So I really want to hammer that home that it's not just, oh, you need to make better assets. You could also do a combination of you could place them better and then you don't need to make better assets and then maybe spend a bit more time like rotating and scaling and all that kind of stuff. But yeah. So I think the overall yeah, I was gonna say like the overall noise level is not that bad, but it's very. So I don't think it's too noisy. Let's get that out of the way, right? Like I don't think it's too noisy, but I think it's very samey and consistent. And that's the thing that I kind of want to break up. There needs to be more variation in the surfacing, the shapes, like all those things. They can be broken up a little bit more. So fair enough, Macfall. That explains it. So yeah, that's good. I mean, that just means that we're getting the feedback in before you start working on it, right? So Okay, let's see. Looking more intricate and natural, and auto noise level still the same. Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. That is good. The second question was, does the landscape painting look good at this point? I'm planning to make some more rocks to rely less on displacement. Yeah, I think it's fine. It's very, very samey again, right? It feels very, very similar all over the board. Whereas, like, if you look at some really cool rev, like, you can kind of see that there's always a difference between like where people walk and where they don't walk, right? So you could kind of integrate that into your scene. But let's say you have like this space is where people walk, and that's going to have like a slightly different color. And then you can do some really cool stuff where maybe there's like a person walking here sometime, and then have like a bunch of grass like sticking out here, and have like little clumps like next to the rock, right? Like sticking out from the sides of it. Because you can do some really cool stuff with this, like really accentuating, like, okay, there's like a flow of people that is kind of controlling like how the spread of this works, right? And then obviously from like a grander scheme, what you want to happen is that you have like something where like a combination of like all those pieces kind of works together, right? Where you have like a couple of rocks where people aren't really walking, you have like a bunch of stuff like sticking up from it. You have like more interesting shapes on the side, so that it's not just like a plateau that we're kind of looking at, right? Like trying to vary that up as well. I know the placement is kind of TBD at the moment, right? But just making sure that that is in there. Right, and now we're seeing, like, I also have the instinct of like, I want to break up this cliff as well. So we have like the big shape, and then we have like the smaller shapes, and then maybe like a person can be walking here. That could be cool. Maybe some smaller pebbles. And then you can see that I'm like purposefully in a very, I try to keep it like very natural. That we have like areas that are like, nope, these are some rocks. No one's going to be walking there. And then, yeah, this starts to feel like more natural. Let's go. Let me know if this makes sense, because let's see, but I'm trying to translate some of this stuff, right? Where you have like some boulders on the sides, some like smaller rocks. And then, oh, this is where the beauty comes in, right? Like you could have like little pieces of foliage kind of just like hanging over here. Like kind of taking shade. And what that is doing, right? What that is doing to me is it's two things. Like it's adding variation into the scene, but it's also pushing me there. Oh, I love this stuff. Like honestly, oh, I love this stuff so much. Like if something gets me excited, is this stuff, you know, where all the different elements, they kind of come together to make the whole better. Also, the trees were just something that I had lying around in my Unreal Engine library. That's fine. I just wanted to point out that it's something to be like very specific about, that like the trees are kind of wrong for like this altitude, right? I knew that was just like a placeholder thing. I did just want to point that out as well. And we can have like little bushes over here. Kind of just like accentuating like the space. Oh, it's gonna be so good. Yeah, hope that makes sense. Hope my scribblings make sense. Let's start there. Maybe we could even have like a bunch of like trees filling in the background as well. Yeah, this is always a bunch of fun. Yeah, cool. But yeah, it is just, especially for these detail shots, man, you can do so much cool stuff with it. Honestly, you can make a detail shot even more powerful than the main shot of like the building in the back, where if you really pay attention to like all these layers and like all these intricacies of like blending all the rocks and like the roads and like the little tufts of grass, and like if everything looks really natural, that could honestly be like, if you pay attention to that level of detail, that could be like the selling point of like your portfolio at a certain point. Yeah, it's coming together really nicely though. Coming together really nicely. This stuff is gonna look sick with all the foliage coming in. It's gonna be so much fun placing it around. Yeah, let's see. So I'm planning to make some more rocks to be less reliant on displacement. Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm just thinking, I don't think it's that big of a deal to have displacement. I know we get into like the whole nanite conversation, right? I think the one part where I don't really mind you having displacement, right, if you're looking at it from the student perspective, is on the landscape, because that's where it actually adds. It has a ton of cool stuff. You think there's too much foliage currently? It's going to be replaced anyway, right? So the shape is going to be different, like the density is going to be different. I think you can use it more sparingly, right? Like really think about like, okay, if this is like the place on a mountaintop, where would these trees grow, right? And like how many trees would there be? Because if you look at like certain altitudes, you're barely going to see any trees, right? So that's a decision that you have to make, where is this below the tree line, where there's still tree growth, or is this above the tree line? And then it's just going to be more like bushes and shrubs and all that kind of stuff. Right? Because if you look at like high altitudes, which is probably what you would expect if you're trying to sell like a mountain monastery, I would potentially keep less foliage. The main reference has a lot of foliage. Yeah, then it just means that the altitude of that place wasn't above the tree line, right? So I'm just saying this as in like, what do you want to do with the scene, right? Because you could make it like, oh, this is like a really obscure, like high mountaintop pilgrimage site. Then I would go no trees. If you're like, oh no, I want to keep it more real to the reference and I want to keep it lower down, then you could add more foliage. It is your choice. Yeah. But thanks for sharing the work, McFell, and keep up the great work. Keep grinding. Looking forward to seeing the next update. Next up for today, Louise. Louise is making some foliage. No worries. Making some cool foliage, Louise. Let's have a look here. The first question is if there's anything that stands out as a natural or off in terms of how the foliage looks. I think the foliage looks really good. The main thing that I'm kind of expecting when it comes to the individual foliage itself is I would love to see more variation, as in like color variation, and like have like slightly damaged petals and older leaves and younger leaves, and a bit more variation in the atlas itself. Right, that is like the first thing that I would say when it comes to the actual plants themselves. And then when it comes to the actual shape of the plants, what I try to do with like every cluster that I make with foliage is I try to give them this sort of shape, right? So the first shape, the first thing is that we kind of have like them bending outwards as they go that way. So we're getting more variation when it comes into like the lean of the plant, right? Which is kind of happening here. I think this is a good example. But I would even try to do that here as well, so that you even get like more variation. Because what this is going to do is it's going to get rid of what can potentially feel like, you see like this cluster here, everything just feels like it's standing up. What I kind of expect to see is that you kind of want to see more stuff like this, right? Where it's still a cluster, you can still recognize it as a singular cluster, but you kind of have this shape that is a little bit more like that. Let me see if my has charged again. Oh, full battery now. Sweet. Hello, Louise. Good to see you in the chat. Let me pop on my light as well. Okay. Back in business. So yeah, that's what I would do first, right? So we have the clusters like swaying out, which is going to help. It's also going to help with the blending between multiple clusters as well, because then you kind of get this like really cool like intersection that's happening with like multiple clusters, which is going to help. The next thing is I want to vary the height, and this is going to happen with the sway naturally, but like I want to vary the height between the center and the edge, because what that does is that you can kind of have like this fall off, and this is especially like a cool trick for, let's say you're doing a road, right? So let me pick like an empty section. Let's say you're doing a road, and you kind of have like your cluster, it kind of naturally like has this curve that kind of goes down towards like an empty area, right? So that helps with the translation to like an area that is probably less dense. But it also helps in, again, when you like have clusters that kind of intersect, it kind of gives this like very natural appearance because we have an intersection between like higher flowers and lower flowers. So they create this like cool interplay between them. And the last variation that we can look at is actually looking from it top down, just changing the shape. Instead of going with a circle, like try to pick a more irregular shape, and it makes a cluster or those plants like feel more organic, more wild than they normally were. So yeah, it sounds so silly, but like with these 3 different angles, we can actually get a lot of like very wild and creative and non-repetitive things happening in the scene. Especially when we combine that with like the random rotation and like a scale variation in the engine itself. What I usually tend to do is I do like a scale variation that goes from like 0.75 to 1.25 on everything as like a base. And depending on the flower, we can go higher or lower. But that helps a lot. And that's also what I mentioned here as well. Like we can play with the density, both in the asset and also in painting. What I mean by that is, for example, you can kind of see it here. Like you have like a lot of density happening here with those flowers, and then more sparser area with those flowers. That is a good way to control where you want people to look. Let's see. I spent quite some time figuring out the vegetation workflow and trying to achieve a nice overall result. Still not quite satisfied on how to make the foliage feel intentionally messy. Oh yeah, it's basically the same thing that we've been talking about, right? Basically all that I said before is just doing more of that stuff is going to make it feel more intentionally messy. It's going to help a lot. Because yeah, right now, like a lot of the foliage, a lot of the chaos that we're getting now is just because it's so dense in the amount of assets. But I think what we want to do is that we want to reduce the amount of assets and make the assets themselves more recognizable, but also more wild and a bit randomized. Because what we don't want to do is overly rely on just like throwing a bunch of assets at it and then getting interesting visuals through just the amount that we throw at it. I think that's not the best way of going about it. Cool. And then the last thing, you can always make like little variations, right? Once you got them all set up in SpeedTree, having like 3 variations of each plant where you have like a single, a cluster, and like a medium cluster or something like that can help a lot in just creating additional variation if needed. Because that's usually the way that it works in like bigger productions. You don't have like just singular cluster. You have like multiple clusters that you can then like combine creatively as well. What? Oh, sorry. Makes more sense. Yeah. Oh my god, I need to learn how to drink water again. Cool. But yeah, that's about it. That's all I had to say on this one. Oh wait, one more thing. This was kind of unplanned, but look at your rows and look at how they grow in the wild, because they don't grow as like a singular rose that just stands up, right? They usually grow in like rose bushes. Just throwing it out there. There will be more iterations because I just made a single variation of each plant. Yeah, that's fine. Especially in the beginning, if you want to get like the shapes right, that's the way that you do it, right? So, yeah. Thanks, Louise. Thank you for sharing. And this is a really cool looking scene. So, great choice on the concept. Yeah, awesome work. Next one from Dylan. Dylan is making a cool shrine. Oh wait, actually, let's go with Nicholas first. Sorry, switcheroo. First question: what's your opinion on the level of light and darkness on the side of the room with the standing mirror? I'm wondering if it might be too dark. We're talking about this side here. I don't really mind it being super dark. I think honestly, for me personally, this is fine. So yeah, I don't really have an issue with it. Yeah. I also, yeah, I made a note here that it's like, there's nothing really that important, especially in this corner anyway. So again, I don't really mind that we're not seeing that corner. Not at all. And then the second question was, you mentioned in the previous stream that storytelling is very important for environment artists. Do you feel that having a scene that is just meant to feel abandoned is strong enough? Or should there be something more that I'm trying to tell? I mean, it's a good question. I still need to find like better words for this. But let me try to explain this, right? Like there's 2 ways of doing storytelling. There's one sort of like explicit kind of storytelling where you're doing a lot of just like visual, like visual storytelling, as in there's a blood trail that leads away from it. You can kind of see the legs of the body. Like it's very on the nose. It's very in your face, right? And then there is another version of storytelling where it's more about the subtleties of things, right? Like the main story is not directly apparent, But as you discover the scene or you have a look at like some of the details, you can kind of get glimpses or like hints at what the story could potentially have been, right? So there's two ways, generally two ways of doing storytelling, right? I think yours definitely leads more into like the very subtle nature of things. And then honestly, like what I would do in this case is I would just have a look at, can we get more out of these paintings? It can literally be family pictures or anything like that, right? Because now you have like a bunch of like paintings here. But what if you try to have paintings that have some sort of coloration to each other, where it's like it's a family portrait, but you can kind of make out like a little subtle story by using like multiple frames, right? But at the end of the day, like it's what you decide to do with it, right? I know that you kind of framed it as in like, oh, is it important for environment artists? And I think it is, but I also think that if you can tell a subtle story that is more leaning into like mystery and is very subtle, those stories are harder to pull off than the majority of the stories that we honestly do as environment artists in the industry. Because yeah, we usually don't rely on subtlety when it comes to storytelling. We usually rely on like bigger set pieces, and the player, because they have so little time, they need to get it like on an instant. And then we give them multiple options, right? We give them like, oh, if you want to learn more about the story and you're that kind of person, then we have like all these little readable things and like all these additional things that you can go and do, but it's not the main thing. Yeah, you can add like a subtle story with like all these frames, tie them together. It could be potentially interesting. But yeah. There's also just something in the beauty of like an abandoned place as well. So it's up to you. It's your decision. So yeah. Good luck with that, Nicholas. Now we go to Dylan. Let's have a look. Where is Dylan? How do you feel about the... Oh, wait. Overlay... How do you feel about the stone lanterns? Are they distracting? Should I add smaller variations? My plan was to treat this as a kind of burial graveyard sign. I think what I would do with the stone lanterns is that it's good, but you want to keep them focused. These are like the notes that I added before, right? And also, if you're gonna add more, then you need more variation, right? That's basically what it comes down to. You have like a bunch of these like stone lanterns in the back, which I don't think they look particularly interesting. I would just keep them to the foreground and just have like natural rock walls like behind it, because then we get a stronger contrast between the two, right? Instead of filling the whole cave, it's gonna dilute the effect of having those stone lanterns in there. Yeah, I think sometimes keeping it simple is the best way, right? Like, it's more effective. Even like I'm debating like the overpaint that I did here by just, if you want to add more, you could add like a bunch of them in the foreground and in the background and all that kind of stuff, like, well, like around the shrine. But even, I'm not really convinced. It kind of depends on what you want to do with the scene, because it kind of gives this air of like it can get too much really quickly. Just depends on what you want to do in it. And then on the roof pieces, should I do a tiling or trim texture, or sculpt individual pieces and bash them together? I plan on having a simple cinematic that might get close to the roof, so it might be better to have them kit bashed. Yeah, I think if you want to go for like higher quality, I would go for individual pieces and then just array them together and just have some variation, right? Because then you can cut out like a couple of tiles and you can have like the roof being like semi-broken and all that kind of stuff. You can do some cool stuff with it. Where if you want it clean, then you can honestly just do a tileable mesh on top of the roof and maybe do like a nanite displacement on it, or maybe just do like a normal tileable and then have meshes on the ends or something like that. You can keep things more simple. But if you wanna have like a higher fidelity look, I would definitely go for like the more individual pieces and just go for like a really good looking roof, right? Because the rest of the scene is going to be relatively simple anyway. So I'm not really that particularly worried about like the performance of the scene. I added another note here though, is these lights, be careful with how distracting they are, because they are taking up a bunch of the, yeah, they're just like really distracting at this point. So it just comes down to like toning them down by a lot. And I think then we should be fine. Now, last question is about the pool itself. I don't really mind like having like a cleansing pool or anything like that in the temple, but because you're trying to make it something like a burial site, like maybe it could lean into that, right? Like maybe instead of having a cleansing shrine, this could be like someone's burial site, someone important, like a special shrine in the middle. And because what I'm trying to do with that idea is I'm trying to tie the whole scene together so that it becomes really consistent and that the main thematic becomes the core driver behind what we're seeing visually, right? So something around like burial or graveyard that fits well into the whole piece culturally. I think that's what you want to go for. And then you can do like the cool stuff that you bring up here, where you have these like little stickers or trinkets or whatever you want to do. There must be something cool that you can do with like little... I'm thinking that some shrines have like these little like hanging cards that they have, right? Don't know too much honestly about this, but that could be cool. And then you can kind of like animate them in the wind, like subtly. Like that could be like really cool to have. Yeah, cool stuff though, Dylan. This is looking really nice. Keep up the good work. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Right. Let's have a look. Ooh, Nacho going fucking ballistic downstairs. Hey, no worries, Dylan. Thank you. Let's see, Pauline. This Hata brought me first class honors grade. Awesome! That is amazing. I wanted to say thank you so much for all the support and guidance. The handbook and the tip sheet became my best friends the last couple of months. Thank you so much. That's awesome. I feel like I grew up so much as an artist during this time, and usually because all the amazing feedback. That's awesome, Paulina. Thank you so much. I'm planning to polish and refine the project a bit more for my portfolio, so I would appreciate any feedback. Yeah. I think honestly, like the feedback would just come down to like more polishing and like, I mean, polishing of the lighting probably. Like those were the first couple of things that I saw, especially in like the close-up detail shots where we are missing some shadow. But I think we talked about that last time, right? Where you can get that shadow back by just enabling like screen space ambient occlusion. I think that would be a good one to look into. But it's just details, right? That we get like a little bit more contact shadow here, a little bit more contact shadow underneath here. Or you might even look into I honestly don't know if they still work, if contact shadows are still a thing. Because maybe it got replaced by like Illumin AO or whatever. So I'm not sure about that. But that would be one to like look into as well. Like if the screen space ambient occlusion doesn't work, look into contact shadows. I think it's just a little tick box that you can just set on whichever light that you want to have. Yeah, this shot looks cool. Like a nice roughness reflections going on. Looks really good. Yeah, it really does. Paulina did a really good job. The one thing that I'm still not a fan of, and obviously it's not the main purpose of this environment, but it's just like the exterior shot. If there was going to be any feedback on it, like that would be probably the one to work on the most. But it's one of those cases where I don't feel like the amount of time that you would need to invest into it to make it look really good is going to be worth it. I honestly think if you want to present this on your portfolio, I think you did already. Have a quick look here. Yeah. With Unreal Engine 5.4. Oh yeah, that's the SSAO one, right? Yeah, like the SSAO one is only in like what are they called again? Console commands. But with the tick box, I was talking about like the contact shadows. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Slate. There's another one that accompanies that one as well, but I can't remember it. But what I was saying is that this is probably like the weakest shot. So I wouldn't necessarily. It's one of those cases where I honestly would remove it from your portfolio. Just because, like, the rest of the shots are so great that you don't want to lose, you don't want to risk, like, any chance of people being like, oh, okay. A bit underwhelmed by, like, the exterior, right? You want to avoid all of that happening. So I think I would just leave it out of there and only focusing on the interior. Because, I mean, yeah. That's where all the beauty is anyway. Right? Looks really, really good. Yeah, this stuff is looking cool. I still wonder, we're gonna do a little test here. I wonder if I can even I'm honestly just gonna play around with stuff for a little bit. Don't want to contrast it too much. I am really keen. Ooh, I definitely don't want a gradient map. Let's not do that. I'm still tempted to kind of push it more towards the blue side as well. Just so that we get like some sort of like color contrast in there. So you can kind of see what that is doing. Like this is with it on and this is with it off. Like I'm trying to really add some like color depth in there, right? By reducing the amount of orange that we have and like infusing like a little bit of blue in the scene. Because I find that the orange is kind of like very dominant at this point. I mean, it's not going to be a one size fits all, I think, but definitely not. Because then I feel like we're making it too gray again. So, no. I think it's doing it twice for this one now. Yeah, it's usually like subtle stuff like that, right? Where trying to get the most out of the stuff that you've already made. You can multiply the AO into the base. What do you mean? Oh, in the base color. Oh, you shouldn't be doing that. I don't know if you meant that, but that's not what you want to be doing with like ambient occlusion. You don't want to build that into your base color. The whole reason why like PBR exists is because we wanted to be more physically accurate, right? And one of the things was that the big transition was that we used to do that with base color. We used to infuse RAO, like basically our lighting information directly into the base color, but that is not physically accurate. That's why we don't do that anymore. This is just like a lighting limitation, right? I think there might be a huge delay as well. Yeah. Some subtle stuff that we can do to like post-process, bring some of the individual elements out. That's what I would honestly focus on the most. Wonder if... No. I'm just having fun playing around now, by the looks of it. Yeah. I don't know. Pretty happy with that. But this comes down to like personal touch, right? So that's what I would do. See if you can polish up those last little things. I would remove the exterior shots as well because, yeah, compared to all the beautiful stuff that you've done on the interior, they're kind of just a little bit more underwhelming. And then, yeah, maybe do a little bit in post. Honestly, that's the majority of things that I would do. Nope, this is not. Yeah, great stuff, Paulina. I think you did an awesome job. Amazing stuff. And yeah, well deserved on your first class honors grade. That is freaking amazing. You put in like a ton of hard work, so that is like well deserved. And yeah, I'm just grateful that I was a part of the ride. You know, that's all I can say. I'm really grateful for that. So yeah, lovely. Let's have a look at this. Let me mute that. Sorry, don't want to get copyright strike. Let's have a look here. When it comes to the camera movements, like you can make them like a little bit more smooth, right? Like almost like a little bit more mellow. It feels very, very quick now. Very quick. Very chaotic. And I think for a scene like this, you kind of want to take it all in, right? So just like very, very slow panning, very, very soft, soft transitions between the animations. That could be cool. Yeah, this is cool. Great stuff. Nice one. All right. And I think that's also it for today. So I will share all the overpaints with the people that have participated in this session. Let me double check. We have done everyone. Yeah. Cool. Thanks everyone for participating. Let me switch it back over. I was just double checking if we had everyone. Oh, that's not the right one. Let's do this. Great stream. Hey, I just saw that David unfortunately missed the deadline. I'm sorry to see that, David. I'll have to pick it up for next time then. So yeah. Thanks all for being here. I'm gonna make good use of a little bit of a shorter session today, and I'm just gonna get cracking on more core stuff. Because yeah, I'm really into that now. I'm really excited to get more stuff for the course done. So I'm gonna take a short break, share everyone's work, and then get back into the swing of things. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks everyone for all the support. Share this stuff with your friends and family. Let your mom know about this too. Especially if she's into 3D. I'm sure it will help anyone, you know. Appreciate your support regardless. And yeah, I'll see you in a couple of days for the workshop. If not, then I'll be back next week, Wednesday. So have a lovely evening, everyone. See you and bye-bye.